Here it is, fresh from the finish line of the recent DISCA Le Mans 24-hour race held here in the UK up in Derby. This is our pre-production Slot It Oreca 07. Well, most of it at least. As you can see, she's a bit battle scarred from 24 hours of constant racing, but yes, that's what happens. DISCA Le Mans 24 hours, arguably one of the toughest slot car endurance races on both cars and drivers, and as you can see, the car shows the scars of that, but the fact it finished is a true testament of it. You know, this is a well, it's a pre-production model, but it's near enough what you'd be buying off the shelf, and the fact that it can compete and survive such abuse for that long is really a true testament to the car. It's just been awesome. I'm a little bit in love with this car. It's very nice indeed. We raced in P2 this year, which has few variations in rules and whatnot. Basically, we have to run the flat six motor around this way so we don't get the magnet traction, but we can run an angle winder this year. That's something that's changed recently. But the car itself, as you can see, it pretty much tells a story. As Murray Walker put it once, anything can happen in motor racing, and it normally does, and a lot of that has happened to this car. So let's have a little look at it and see where we've got to. Obviously you can see we've got missing headlight lens there. The side pods are missing, although I did find them shortly afterwards. Got them here, look. Ooh, where's that bloody gone? Let's do it. I did find the side pods, they're here. So I may reattach them, I may leave them off just to kind of keep it as a raced finished car, but we'll see. This is understandably probably not going to be seeing a track again. This will take pride of place on a shelf at the local club and be displayed in all its glory, because it's had a hard life, bless her. It's no mean feat completing for 24 hours, and she's deserved a well-earned rest. So let's keep looking around now. So yeah, like I say, the light lens missing off of this one, but bizarrely by the end of the race this light was the only one that was working. This one, it's a little bit smashed up on the lens, but wiring wise everything got ripped out internally here. Look underneath the car, you can see it's the stock chassis. It's a 1.25mm offset pod, which I do believe may become commercially available at some point. And the only real differences to the car and the body is you can see it's had a bit of reinforcement on the front. Throughout the course of a 24-hour digital race, it gets a lot of knocks, and without that, any production car is gonna suffer badly across here and get a lot of damage. As you can see, even with the reinforcement, we did have a crack that occurred across here. That was reinforced with a bit of tape. Took the decision to do that rather than actually remove the corner itself, because when it sits on the track, these fins out the front do provide a little bit of stability on the body. Obviously you don't want them contacting the track all the way around, but in extreme circumstances they will stabilize the car, so losing that isn't something we really wanted to do. So that's why that tape's there, to keep that in place. Amazingly, the rear wing and all that's still in here. That did become detached a couple of times, but there was no breakages or anything, and it could be quite simply set back into its little places. There's some tape put over it just to kind of make sure it didn't pop out again, but once that was put back in, that did all right. The rear, as you can see, has suffered many damages. We were punted up the backside on more than one occasion, and very hard towards the end of the race. You can see these light lenses here, they're meant to be integrated into part of this kind of rear diffuser section, and all that has just been crumpled up completely. Luckily the lights still worked, they're still in place, they're hanging down here, because without them we'd have had to have stopped the car and repaired all the lighting and everything like that. Now before the race even started in I think it was free practice 1, we did get in a little kerfuffle with another car. It wasn't our fault in any way, shape or form, but we suffered a large impact, and one of the front body posts actually broke. You can see the body is held on by 3 posts. There's 1 at the rear here and 2 at the front. And you may notice that with this car, it differs from the Lola and other earlier LMP cars in that the chassis stops here, and this section is all part of the body. So the chassis is, there's some separation of that here, where I think previously all this would have been part of the chassis and the body would have sat on top, but this body is all complete here and the chassis is separate. But yeah, we lost one of the posts early on. We managed to glue it back in place, but obviously it was severely weakened, so we had to be very cautious. Needless to say, that would come back to haunt us later on in the race. We had an issue where not only did that post go, but because it was weakened at the front from only having one post, the other one got broken off as well. We had an incident and the front of the car was just flapping about. So it was the middle of the night. We needed to come up with a solution. We couldn't run the car with no connection with the body other than the rear. So what we did is we took these out of our spare box. Now these are the long screws used for suspension systems, slotted suspension. We drilled a hole, or should I say made a small hole with a soldering iron in the top of the body so that the screw could poke up through. And then we used the little top nut from the suspension system and screwed that onto the top. Now obviously that would stop the screw from falling back through, and that secured the body onto the car. Now the problem with that is, how do you control the ride height? Obviously the body's going to flop straight down onto the road. Well, stroke of luck, this car is actually has these grub screws here and here, and there's two at the rear as well, which you can use to raise and lower the actual body and how it sits in the car and get some nice body float and get it to sit really nicely. Now these actually saved our lives. Originally we weren't using them on the front, we had them at the rear to control the ride height, but they weren't necessary at the front. But after this happened, we could put some grub screws in here and that would raise the body up to exactly where we needed it. And obviously our little suspension mod at the front here would stop the body from coming off. And that little modification absolutely saved our lives. Not only meant the car could continue, but it really didn't hamper its performance in any way, shape or form. The car performed phenomenally after this and was getting some pretty good lap times going on. So yes, I'd class that as a bit of a successful on-the-fly engineering solution there. But unfortunately our woes didn't end there. Later on we did suffer a chassis failure where the guide sits through this little orifice here. That snapped off, so we came up on a corner and the guide was just hanging straight down here. So unfortunately in that situation we did have a spare chassis. It wasn't prepared in any way, shape or form. We can't just swap the body over to another chassis. That's not what the rules will allow. So we had a bare chassis. So it was a lengthy pit stop to remove all the running gear, all the digital chip, all the lighting nonsense off of the broken chassis and put it onto our spare one so that the body could be put back on and we could continue. So yeah, that was a lengthy pit stop, which unfortunately put us out of contention for P2. Up until that point, we were making really good progress. We did have the lead originally until our little suspension front body post failure issue. But we were making good ground and we were coming back, and it would have been a really close fight to the finish, I think. But unfortunately that put us completely out of contention. There was a good few hundred laps downtime while we fixed that issue. But we got the car back together, it got back on the road, and it carried on lapping, and it carried on lapping very rapidly. So all in all, it was a successful fix, but a costly one nevertheless. But wait, there's more. Unfortunately, our woes didn't end at that point. We were on the spare chassis already. I think we had about an hour left to run. And as you can see, there's some key bits missing here and a large crack here. We had a massive shunt up the back from someone else, and it actually cracked our replacement chassis right across here where the screws go in for the motor pod. Now, obviously that's a massive issue because you can see the rear post here, that's on the part that's broken off, so there would be nothing supporting any of this to the rear of the car. Luckily, where it did break was where the motor pod mounts, so we can screw this up to the motor pod, and essentially the car was supported on the motor pod itself. In doing so, we had to lock all of this out, which meant we had no suspension, we had no float, no travel, no anything. The car is absolutely rigid. But it meant it got back together, and it meant we could continue lapping and actually finish the race. It was a bit of a pig to drive after that point, but to be fair, it still lapped at a reasonable pace. It wasn't phenomenal, but it was enough to stay in contention, and we managed to hold on to second in P2, and I am very pleased with that. Considering all the ups and downs we had throughout, and all the on-the-fly fixes we had to have, I think that's a monumental achievement. So yeah, she's got her scars, bits missing, bits dented, bits repaired, but the old girl finished, so I'm not going to complain about that. So let's have a little look inside for one last time. I can't count how many times this body's been on and off throughout the course of this weekend, but yeah, I think we owe it to her one last time to have a look inside and see what happened. There's that long screw I spoke about. So yeah, so it's a very long suspension screw. We managed to get right up through the body in the position where the body post should have been. Obviously the body post snapped off and was long lost, so. And here she is. Let me turn it that way. So like I say, this reinforcement here, this was all done prior to the race. It was kind of a preemptive repair to strengthen the front end, and to be fair, it did do its job. Yes, we suffered this damage on this corner, but all in all, the body shell up the front here did survive quite well. Like I say, there's a fair bit of buckling up the back here. These lights aren't where they're meant to be. There should be, you know, some plastic trim around here, but again, you know, did the job. The lights survived. This LED here, that should have wiring. Here it is. Christ knows how and when that happened, but basically we had to drive for the majority of the night with just one headlight, which wasn't ideal. I'm not going to lie. When you're driving through traffic in near pitch black, and all you've got is your lights to judge things by, only having one doesn't make it very simple. So yeah, that wasn't great, but as the rules were, the whole time this one kept working, we could keep running, so we did, and this one survived somehow, so yeah, made it to the end. The lighting kit itself, it had a exhaust flash going on both sides here, which is why we've got these two different lighting circuits. And the capacitor for the lighting board has been detached and put over here, just because obviously we've got a nice bit of space here, so we're going to utilise that. This motor wire shouldn't be there, that should be over here somewhere, so yeah, it suffered a bit of a whack. As you can see, we've got suspension on the side of the pod here, suspension on the front. Not that that mattered, because at the end we had to lock it all out anyway so that we could keep the body in check here. Got our hall sensor for the digital, that's all a bit wafty. Digital chip, guide, this is where it broke, the first chassis broke, just where the guide connects here. But other than that, she made it, she did pretty well. It was one motor the whole way through as well, there was no failures there. In fact, the only mechanical failure we had throughout the whole weekend was due to this. I don't know if you can see here. One of these teeth here on this pinion snapped off. Half the tooth has just gone there, and that was enough. It was quite noisy driving around, and we figured there was some meshing issue, but I think that's probably what had caused it. So the first time we probably caught that tooth in a braking area, it obviously started stripping the spur gear. And this was the spur gear that was in place at the time, and if you flip it over, you can see teeth are quite heavily worn. And yeah, it wasn't long before the rear axle was spinning and, well, freewheeling by itself and not actually making any contact with the pinion. So we took the decision to switch out for a nylon pinion. It's not something we would typically do, but to be fair, it lasted the whole race. Did pretty well. So actually, while I got it open, you can see here as well, these are the grub screws I was talking about earlier. So you can actually put them through, and they rest on corresponding little areas on the body, and let the body obviously when these wires aren't protruding in all the wrong directions after a while of abuse. The body will sit on those, and you can adjust them up and down to get your body ride height and get your float perfect. And yeah, makes for a really nice little touch, and actually saved the day when we were putting this back together after a few bits of damage. So yeah, got the tire debris that's still in there. But yeah, that is our P2 Le Mans race car as it finished this year's 10th running of the DISCA Le Mans series. And what a brilliant little car it is. I'm very pleased with this. Yes, we didn't get the finish we wanted, but performance-wise, this car should have finished first. We were very unlucky with a few failures, which is by no means an issue with the car. It's a real test of not just the drivers, but the actual mechanics of the car. So you've got to expect a few failures, especially on what is essentially a shop bought chassis here. This is, you know, the chassis and the body, aside from this reinforcement, that's exactly how it would come. So it really is a testament to it, the fact it lasted as well as it did. This is yeah, pretty cool. Well, let's get her back together for the last time and finally put her to rest. She's going to go in a case or on a shelf somewhere at our local club and be displayed for all to see. She's done good. She's earned her time to rest and just be admired from afar now. So yeah, that is it. That's our pre-production Slot It Oreca 07.